What's up, guys? Hope everything's going well. As you guys all know, for the last 3, now 4 years, every week during the NFL season, I have my weekly review videos, which do very well. But the one bugaboo with the weekly review videos is that they are just once a week. And I'm trying to come up with a new idea or segment every week in between the weekly reviews, just so I can keep the momentum going for my channel. And I'm kind of confused on what I should do. I don't know if it should be a weekly mailbox video or a weekly preview video, because what happens is that obviously the league has Thursday night games, and I want to try and space out my videos during the week and not have them so crammed. So if I'm going to do a weekly preview video where I give my game predictions, it'll probably have to be done after the Thursday night game. I don't know. But anyway, this week I decided to be kind of lazy and just do a mailbox video, but I don't know if this is going to be the standard moving forward, but just for this week, that's what I decided to do. So I just want to give you guys a heads up on what's going to be happening. Maybe I'll start doing previews every week. I don't really know, but I'm open to suggestions. Anyway, I got a lot of good questions here to answer, so sit back, relax, and enjoy. First question with a cat Abby. Better hide your cats, folks. How many touchdowns did the NFL need to score in the end racism end zone until racism is finally defeated? Well, as we all know, a couple years ago, Jimmy Garoppolo put his foot down in the end racism end zone in Denver, and that kind of knocked racism out for a couple years, but it's back in full force now, especially in an election year. So I don't think the NFL is going to be able to have any amount of touchdowns scored to end racism. The only way that we're really going to end racism is if Donald Trump and Kamala Harris step into the end zone together and share a wet, sloppy kiss to unite America and spit on racism's face. If Jacoby Brissett injected too many marijuanas, would May start? Well, actually, no, we're still in September. But to answer your question, as I said before the season started, Jacoby Brissett is a temporary starter. There's no upside here. He's boring as fuck to watch. He's a dink and dunk merchant. And that's why I was so upset when they decided to start Brissett for the first, we all know that Drake May is going to eventually take over, so why delay the inevitable? People say, oh, well, his offensive line is terrible and you don't want to ruin his confidence. Okay, well then why even bother drafting him then? Why, like, oh, you're going to not play him until the offensive line is good? At some point, if you're going to play a guy, he's going to play against good teams, and he's going to make mistakes, and he has to learn through trial and error. So I don't understand the point of starting Jacoby Brissett. So to answer the question, I guess, I don't think it matters how many marijuanas Brissett injects. He's going to start the next couple games regardless of the situation. But I do think eventually May is going to start, obviously, and render the entire Jacoby Brissett experiment useless, which I've been saying all along. Will Sean McDermott's power wane as we move away from the 9/11 equinox? Well, it is true. I do believe the Bills are 7-0 in the regular season ever since the story leaked about Sean McDermott using 9/11 as a motivational tactic last season with the Bills, although it's still not powerful enough to overcome Patrick Mahomes in the postseason. I still think as long as the Bills have Josh Allen, especially now that Tua is dead, that's another threat. Aaron Rodgers is old. The AFC East is going to be the Bills for the taking as long as they have Josh Allen in his prime. I picked Allen to win MVP, so I think the Bills are going to be elite. I picked them to win the AFC East. I'd had them again losing to Mahomes, probably somewhere in the divisional round this year again. So I think it's going to be more of the same for Buffalo this year, and it really just matters whether the Buffalo owners, the Pegulas, whatever their names are going to be tolerant with continuing to lose in the playoffs to the Chiefs or the Ravens. I mean, the Bills are in that class. They're in that elite class of contenders in the AFC. The Chiefs, the Ravens, Bills. I think those are like the 3 best teams, but we'll see what happens. I don't know. I'm not a psychic. I'm just a class act. If Bryce Young and Patrick Mahomes fused, would Mahomes' ability override Young's shiftiness? I think you meant shittiness. Or would Patrick Mahomes be a bad quarterback? I would like a serious answer, Barry. Well, in this channel, you get nothing but serious answers all the time. There's no humor at all. To answer the question, I think when you combine Mahomes, who's probably the best quarterback ever, with Bryce Young, who's one of the worst quarterbacks ever, you probably end up just getting an average quarterback. Unironically, probably something like Jacoby Brissett, who we were just talking about. But that's an interesting question. I do think if they fused, they would probably be very deformed because there isn't the technology available yet to fuse human beings together. So that'd also be something to consider. They'd probably be in immense pain the entire time, and it would most likely be seen as torture to have them put on shoulder pads and go out on an NFL field to play. How many weeks will it take for the Browns to drop famous woman respecter Deshaun Weinstein to back up? The ironic thing about that is that Deshaun Watson's backup, Jameis Winston, also has a long history of sexual assault allegations. Not as long as Deshaun's, but they're not exactly going to win PR battle if they bench Watson. At this point, it's obvious that the Browns are just looking for a way to void Watson's contract contract for clause by releasing new accusations that they've been sitting on, which doesn't make any sense because they traded for Watson in the first place a couple years ago when he had over 20 sexual assault allegations, and they still gave him that money anyway, so they knew that he was a predator, and now they're trying to get out of the contract by saying this guy's a predator when they traded for him knowing that he was a predator. It's just so dumb, but it's so Browns. I just think at some point what's going to happen is they're just going to have to eat his entire salary in dead money, because at the end of the day, it's a production-based business, and you can be a horrible person who abuses women and takes advantage of women as long as you can throw football really well. But once you stop throwing that football well and you start playing like shit, then people finally start to care about how terrible you are as a person, and that's what we're seeing with Watson. So I don't know. I think I have a feeling this might be the last year. I think they're going to give, because they paid him so much money, they're going to give him chance after chance. Played, I think, 13 games for him now. He's been terrible most of the time. I'd say if he continues to play the way he did versus Dallas in week 1, I'd say he maybe has like 4 or 5 more weeks, and then they'll put in Gropus Winston. After giving Tua a concussion, what is Demar Hamlin's kill to death ratio? Is this counted as a kill? And if you think about it, does his death really count? This is just a completely insensitive and disgusting question, and that is why I'm going to answer it. Obviously, Tua is not dead, but he might end his career, which a lot of people thought Hamlin's career was over when he literally died on the field a couple years ago in Cincinnati. I would still say that unless Tua dies, he still has a 0-to-1 kill to death ratio, which is not great, but he's working on it, obviously, and that really shows a lot of effort. That's the kind of effort you want to see in your players. You want to see improvement. You want to see them put the time in, and that's why Demar Hamlin is so well liked by everybody, because he's such a hard worker. But all joking aside, I hope Tua is okay, because I'm a good person. Should the Panthers already give up on Bryce Young and draft another quarterback? Yes. The answer is yes. I mean, I don't really have to go into a lot of detail here. The guy's efficiency-wise is just as bad, if not worse, than Jamarcus Russell. He's just not fat. In fact, I do think Jamarcus Russell could probably eat Bryce Young if it came to it. The last few years, the Jags have lost a multitude of games due to the inability to score while in the red zone due to turnovers or settling for field goals, which have led to many one-score losses, which could have been wins. Do you think they will be able to fix this and become a relevant team in the AFC? I think every team and every fan base thinks that they can do better in the red zone. I also believe that if you're a quarterback or a coach and you struggle in the red zone for a period of years, that's kind of just who you are. And I think as long as Trevor Lawrence is there and going to be throwing the ball, I just think that he's not going to be a great red zone quarterback. There's some quarterbacks just aren't great red zone quarterbacks, and it doesn't mean they're terrible overall, but when they get in the red zone, they just kind of aren't great at throwing for touchdowns or getting the ball in the end zone. Matt Ryan was a great example of this, and he had a couple good years in terms of the red zone percentage, but that's kind of an example that I just point to. That's why, despite the insane amount of yardage that Matt Ryan would put up every year, he'd only have, for most of the years outside of his MVP season, he'd have 25 or so touchdowns. So the yardage would be insane, the completions would be insane, all the other counting stats would really be insane, except for the touchdown pass record. So I just maybe Trevor Lawrence is just going to be one of those guys. But you could say the same thing about every team. You know, if you don't do well in the red zone, yeah, you're going to be more likely to lose close games. That's just how football works. Will Caleb Williams become the next Rex Grossman? In a way, if he does become the next Rex Grossman, that might actually be good for the Bears, because as we all know, Grossman made it to a Super Bowl where they lost. Now, here's where I'm going to take a deep dive and really mind fuck you guys. As we all know, Arch Manning is, whenever he declares, is probably going to be one of the top picks in the draft at Texas. You know who Rex Grossman lost to in the Super Bowl? That's right, Peyton Manning. So I think that if the Bears end up making the Super Bowl with Caleb Williams, if that happens in a couple years down the road, Arch Manning will be in the league, and Caleb Williams will face Arch Manning's team in the Super Bowl and lose to Arch Manning. So he will really be the next Rex Grossman then, because he will have lost to a Manning brother in the Super Bowl. And as we all know, there's never been a good quarterback in the history of the NFL that has lost to a Manning brother in the Super Bowl before, especially Eli. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you grade Shannon Sharpe's performance on that IG Live video? Well, obviously, it was set up. You don't just accidentally leave your phone on and log into IG Live while you're having sex with, I don't know who he was having sex with, but he was giving her the cripple cross-eye because he was really giving her the business. Now, we don't know whether the woman was faking it or exaggerating it. I do think based on Shannon Sharpe's size that he probably does have a big Hoover, so I don't know that she was faking it or not. But I would say based on the noises that we heard and the moans of pleasure, I'd give him a solid 7.5 out of 10. Are we ruling out the possibility that Hollywood Brown died and the Chiefs are just covering it up? Well, when you talk about the Chiefs and players dying, we all know about Javon Belcher, which is a story that I say this every year. I can't believe the NFL just kind of swept that under the rug. That's still one of the most horrifying stories ever, and it just kind of gets lumped in with other things. But I think no matter what, you look at Hollywood Brown, I think that he's going to go down as one of the best players the Chiefs have ever had, regardless at this point. They may even retire his number, similar to the way that the OKC Thunder retired Nick Collison's number. So yeah, I think that out of respect for Marquise Brown and all that he's done for the Chiefs franchise ever since he got traded there a couple months ago, I don't think the Chiefs would try and cover up him dying. But again, he is related to Antonio Brown, so you never know. Maybe his cousin was involved somehow. I don't know, but I'm hoping the best for Marquise Brown. That shoulder, as we all know, shoulder injuries, especially shoulder surgeries, are usually fatal. Will Jimmy Garoppolo play a game? I want to see his face on live television. He's on the Rams now. He got suspended the first couple games because he got caught taking PEDs because he wanted to win more than everybody else. At least that's what I tell myself. And we all know that Matthew Stafford, usually a pretty durable guy, but he might miss a game or two every now and then. But we also know that Matthew Stafford's wife is into his backup quarterbacks. Literally, she said it herself. So I'm not making this up. And if you're talking about, well, if your wife has a wandering eye for backup quarterbacks and you're the starting quarterback, the literal worst backup quarterback you could possibly have with a wife with a wandering eye is Jimmy Garoppolo. So I don't know if he'll play a game, but I do know that he's still going to be able to get the attention of a lot of females and males too. He does play in California. Is Jaylen Herz holding the Eagles back? He has had a rough half of last year and a rough first game to start the season, or do you think he will come back and be 2022 Jaylen Herz? As an Eagles fan, I've kind of accepted at this point that he'll probably never reach 2022 Jaylen Herz stats again, but I still think he's a good quarterback. Not every quarterback is either the greatest or the worst, and I think Hertz is just simply a good quarterback. But as an Eagles fan, first and foremost, I just care, can he just help the Eagles put up points on the board? I don't necessarily give a fuck about his stats. So even though he didn't play well versus the Packers, the Eagles still put up 34 points and they won. So if the Eagles can still churn out a shitload of points, I don't care if Jaylen Herz has mediocre numbers, as long as he's able to move the ball down the field. But yes, I mean, obviously, if you had the choice for your favorite team to have a great quarterback play, you would obviously say yes, but I think that the Eagles are still capable of being one of the best teams in the league, unironically, and I don't say that just as an Eagles fan. Will Malik Willis win a starting job at some point down the line after third weekend? I don't really know what the last part of that means, but I do feel like Malik Willis is somewhat like a Deshaun Kaiser, who ironically did also play for the Packers. I've been saying this, Malik Willis makes Bryce Young look like Patrick Mahomes, which is saying a lot for me. He is one of the worst quarterbacks I've ever seen. There is no feasible way that Malik Willis is going to remain the starter for the Packers until Jordan Love gets back, whenever that might be, 4, 5, 6 games down the line. He's going to have 1 or 2 games. He's going to be terrible. The Packers are going to lose, or they're going to win, but it certainly won't be because of anything Malik Willis did, and they're going to be looking for a quarterback, or they're just going to have to grit their teeth and brave through having shitty quarterback play until Love gets back. But I feel like after this experiment, no, I don't think Malik Willis has any future of being a starter in the league because he's that terrible. This is going to be his last chance. Are the Niners' Super Bowl window as close to close as everyone thinks it is? Do they have another shot possibly next year if they fail again? It all comes back quarterback play. Right now, Brock Purdy's still on his rookie contract, so they can give out a shitload of money to their other big name guys, which they just gave a huge contract to Brandon Ayuk. I think that if there is going to be something that shakes up the team, they're probably going to be trading away McCaffrey because running backs are the most replaceable, as we've already seen this year with Jordan Mason coming in and looking like Walter Payton in the 49ers system. So if the 49ers are going to try and shift some guys from their current group, or their current group of stars, rather, McCaffrey would probably be the first one to go. But I think as long as they got Brock Purdy there, and this sounds crazy because I know people still say, well, is Brock Purdy good or is he actually terrible? I think Brock Purdy's good. They're going to be contenders. They got George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk. So as long as they have the main pieces there, they're going to be in contention because they have a lot of talent on their roster. But again, windows close very, very quickly in the NFL. But I think the 49ers are pretty much set up as well as anybody that I can think of just off the top of my head for the next 3 or 4 years in terms of being at the top of the league. Besides the Chiefs, obviously the Chiefs are set as long as they got Mahomes for the next 10 years, but the 49ers are up there too, even though they're going to have to pay Brock Purdy his money after this year. What does the GOAT conversation look like if Mahomes and the Chiefs three-peat? This has been a conversation for a lot of people. Well, if the Chiefs three-peat, that's something nobody else has ever done in the Super Bowl era. Tom Brady never did it, and so that makes Mahomes the GOAT for three-peating. Here's the deal. At the end of the day, the conversation between the GOAT quarterbacks is always going to come down to rings. And especially with Brady fans, that's really what the question is here. The question is it going to be Mahomes or Brady? It's like Jordan and LeBron in basketball. If LeBron had four-peated to win all of his 4 rings and never won another ring, would Jordan Jordan fans still say that LeBron's better, even though he would still have 2 fewer rings than Jordan, who never four-peated? No. People are going to say, oh, well, you look at the rings. Jordan would still have 2 more. So if, let's say, Mahomes and the Chiefs do three-peat, and they win the 4th ring, Mahomes never wins another ring, or he finishes shy of 7 rings by the time he retires, people are still going to say it doesn't really matter if they three-peated. It's an incredible accomplishment, but for the GOAT convo, it's more of a totality thing. And in my opinion, if Mahomes and the Chiefs three-peat, for Mahomes, it won't really matter because he would still have to win, I think, at least 8 rings to become the consensus GOAT for a lot of people. But for the Chiefs franchise, absolutely, it would be historic because nobody else has done it in the Super Bowl era. But there's 2 kind of questions there. 2-15 for the Cardinals, referencing my season preview video. Really? Give us a better prediction, please, Mr. McCock. To be honest, when I predicted the Cardinals to go 2-15, I actually was expecting Marvin Harrison Jr. to look a lot better than he did during his career debut versus Buffalo. So actually, I'm going to change the record prediction to 1-16 instead. Does that make you feel better, pal? Marvin Harrison Jr. ends up being a terrible player. It would actually be kind of funny, to be honest with you, because he was seen as a surefire, can't miss, and he ends up becoming a terrible receiver. That would be pretty funny to me. Are you still going to do the triggering vid for this season? This person is referencing my triggering fan bases. I really don't know. Maybe down the line. I think the worst thing that I can imagine is just becoming repetitive, and at a certain point, you do kind of run out of things to make fun of franchises for that I haven't already said, because I've done it each of the last 3 years. Yeah, Ray Lewis, murderer. O.J. Simpson, murderer. Deshaun Watson, we all know the jokes. Like, it just, I don't know if I'm going to be dedicated enough to really dig deep to find the content for 32 different teams. I mean, it's a lot of work to come up with clever jokes and insults for 32 teams when you've already done it 3 times. So I don't know, but maybe down the line. Never say never. Shout out to Justin Bieber. Based off of what's already happened this season, 1 game, how much should an organization value a backup quarterback, and how much is too much to spend on one, whether picks or salary? Well, backup quarterbacks are like punters. You hope that you never have to use them. I feel like it's just one of those things where, you know, it's like insurance. Obviously, you pay a shitload in insurance every month, and there's sometimes where you're like, why am I paying this much money when I'm not even doing anything? I'm paying, $800 a month for insurance, which just feels like you're giving away money until you actually get into an accident. But at the end of the day, here's the deal. If I was in charge, I really wouldn't focus on spending money on backup quarterbacks, because in my opinion, chances are that there's very few good quarterbacks anyway. So the chances are, you got to play the percentages here. The chances of our backup quarterbacks, any of our backup quarterbacks being good if our starter goes down, are very slim. So I just would put the money into other resources. There was a good old quote from Tom Moore, the famous Indianapolis Colts offensive coordinator back in the day when they had Peyton Manning, and a player asked him, he said, why don't we practice snaps with the backups besides Peyton? And Tom Moore said, because if Peyton goes down, we're fucked, and we don't practice fuck. That's kind of my mentality too. If Zeke, spelled incorrectly, hangs on for a few years and reaches over 100 total touchdowns, will he make the Hall of Fame? He already has over 10,000 all-purpose yards. I don't think he would. I think he would kind of be seen in a similar light as somebody like Sean Alexander, who had a very good career, scored over 100 touchdowns. I don't think he would. He got off to that type of start to his career, but he kind of has fallen off the last couple years. However, again, I always say the bar has been lowered below the ground for the Hall of Fame now that Devin Hester's in. So do I think he deserves to be a Hall of Famer? No, but I also don't think Devin Hester deserves to be a Hall of Famer. But since Devin Hester is in the Hall of Fame, do I think he should be a Hall of Famer now because the bar has been lowered so extremely low? Yeah, compared to Devin Hester, yes, Zeke belongs in the Hall of Fame. Do I think he will get in the Hall of Fame? I don't know. Probably not, because he didn't play enough special teams or some stupid shit. It's fucking stupid logic that people have about special teams for whatever reason just drives me up a wall. No offense to all the Georgia football players. Will this be another year of Derek Carr playing incredible for part of the season and then dreadful the rest, or could this finally be where he puts it all together? No, do not fall for the Derek Carr tease. I don't know how many times he has to do this. It's like Lucy and Charlie Brown, where he has the football out and you finally start to believe in him, and then boop, at the last second, he'll pull it away. Here's what's most likely going to happen with Derek Carr. The Saints are in a terrible division, so they're probably going to win a bunch of games, even though it might not be necessarily a great team. But Derek Carr, he had a great week 1 against the worst team in the league in Carolina. I think he'll probably get to a point where the Saints are like 6-2 or 7-2, and then Carr will just play like dog shit, and the Saints will fall back to being like 7-6 or something, and then he'll have a couple good games to end the year when it's not really important. That's what Derek Carr does. That's why he somehow ends up with respectable numbers every year, and then you look at the win-loss column and it's like 6-10 or something. It's the same. He's like a slightly worse version version of Kirk Cousins, basically. So I would not put my faith in Derek Carr. In big moments, he disappears. In big games, he disappears. We've seen it all throughout his career, and I see no reason why it's not going to change this year. I could be wrong, but I doubt it. Can Jaden Daniels actually grow and develop in Washington? Well, Jaden Daniels, let's see, is 23 years old. He's going to be 24 in December, so he's probably done with puberty at this point of his career, although they say the human brain doesn't fully mature until your late 20s or some shit like that. I have no fucking idea. I'm not a scientist. But physically going through puberty and developing stuff like that, he's probably done growing. In terms of a football player, I would say that Washington is probably one of the worst places for a young quarterback to go. Again, Washington has just been a complete clusterfuck of an organization since 1992, so I don't see any reason why he's going to become a good quarterback. Even though he does have talent, he might become a good player. I don't think he'll ever become a dominant player because Washington is just such a shitty organization. How many McDaniels, referring to Mike McDaniel, could Dan Campbell take in a Hell in a Cell type matchup? Probably not as many as you expect, because Mike McDaniel is a recovering alcoholic. A lot of people don't know this, or at least they forgot about it. And the thing is, you know, recovering alcoholics, they can be kind of on edge and stingy. And that's kind of why Mike McDaniel probably stumbles a lot and has a lot of awkward pauses in his interviews, because his brain is kind of messed up from all the alcohol he had. And people think it's funny. Oh, look at him. He's so goofy and quirky. And I'm like, it's really not that funny. He probably has some brain damage from drinking alcohol a lot. But I think Mike McDaniels, I'd probably say somewhere maybe around 5 or 6. I do think that McDaniels, if he was angry, if he ever relapsed or fell off the wagon and was drunk, I think drunk McDaniels could pose a big problem for Dan Campbell. But hopefully he's able to remain sober and continue to do what he does, because he is a lovable personality. Both of them are, really, but I hope that he's able to stay sober for him and his family. But yeah, the answer is about 5. Could Scooby, my dog, run for a touchdown in the Shanahan system offense? I'm pretty sure every dog I've ever had right now could score a touchdown in the Shanahan offensive system. And I'm not talking about when they were alive. I'm talking about right now. Like my dog's been dead for several years, could probably score a touchdown in the Shanahan system. That's how friendly it is for running backs. I don't know how many times we have to see it. It goes all the way back to Mike Shanahan with Denver, where every year they just shit out another 1,000-yard runner. So that's what made me kind of side-eye Terrell Davis's Hall of Fame candidacy. I'm like, was he really that great, or was he just a product of a great system? So yes, Scooby would probably win Offensive Player of the Year for the Shanahan system if he was playing in that offense. But he wouldn't win MVP, because the MVP goes to quarterbacks, and Scooby, unfortunately, is not smart enough to memorize a playbook. Did you watch Track and Field Olympics? If so, opinions. This isn't really football related, but I've never really been a huge track and field person because it's just kind of not really exciting. Obviously, the athleticism is great, but I kind of need something else thrown in there to spice it up. Like just watching fast people run really fast in a straight line for 40 meters or whatever doesn't do it for me. That's why I don't really get interested in the combine either. It's kind of similar to the combine. I need somebody being tackled or something. I need some other shit being thrown in there. So I'm not a huge track and field guy. Do you agree that the NFL is the worst it's been in your lifetime the last 3 or so years, given the low scoring, poor QB play, and volume? I don't know, people make fun of how I say volume, but volume, whatever, fuck you. Of underneath throws never being higher. Ironically, if you look at the numbers, the scoring has stayed, with the exception of the 2020 pandemic season where there was empty stadiums and stuff, and the offenses were more productive by a couple points. The scoring points per game average is pretty similar to what it's always been. I think, though, yes, in terms of quarterback play, in terms of exciting quarterback play, I think that it's probably at the worst it's been. A lot of checkdowns, a lot of quarterbacks they're very cautious because they don't want to throw interceptions. There's still the stigma of interceptions, and so they might be more likely to throw a 5-yard pass on 3rd and 15 instead of taking a chance downfield. They might be more willing to take a sack instead of interception, because interceptions, people get made fun of for interceptions. People don't get made fun of for taking sacks. In fact, in today's society, it's quite the opposite. If you take sacks, you're probably going to be considered a hero to many communities, but that's neither here nor there. I would say yes, if you look at the average quarterback play, and I blame Tom Brady for this mostly because I hate Tom Brady, and it's my opinion. I can do whatever the hell I want. His influence was a terrible thing for young quarterbacks coming up. It's just watching this guy dink and dunk down the field, and he was so successful with it for so many years, and I think that's how people have come to say, oh, well, we can do it, we should do that, instead of just being men and having 2 testicles and throwing the ball down the field like a man into double coverage. That's what the football is supposed to be about. But it makes me cry to see the amount of checkdowns and stuff that I see every week on the NFL. Yet I still come crawling back to it like a sheep cheap, so who am I to blame anybody? Will George Pickens become an all-time great if he is paired with a great quarterback? I think he could. He has the talent. He's like the only bright spot, exciting player that the Steelers have offensively for the last 2 or 3 years, but I don't know if he'll ever be paired with a great quarterback. I think he'll have to demand a trade or be cut or released and go to another team, most likely by trade, because they're not going to cut him unless he does something terrible off the field. He'll have to go to another team. It would be funny if he did end up with like Kansas City or Buffalo with like Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, just because, you know, those are like the two. I feel like those are the only two quarterbacks now that everybody agrees that are great. Like even Lamar, you know, even Lamar has won 2 MVPs, but there's still a large contingent of people that are like, he's not a great quarterback. He sucks. So I feel like Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, the top 2 quarterbacks in the league. If he was ever paired up with one of those guys, yeah, it would be he'd probably put up all pro numbers. But we don't know. I mean, there's not that many great quarterbacks in the league right now, so I don't know if he'll ever get the opportunity. Certainly not in Pittsburgh with Justin Fields and a washed up Russell Wilson. Who's a player that's under the radar but is set to have a big year? This is kind of cheating on my part, no offense to the Patriots, because my offensive player of the year prediction before the season started was Puka Nacua for the Rams, but he got hurt in week 1, so he's going to miss a couple games, so screw that prediction. But a guy who looked great in week 1 was Cooper Kupp, and I think that, and I was guilty of this, I said I don't know if he can be the same guy that he was a couple years ago in 2021 when he had probably like the best season a receiver's ever had, all things considered, including the postseason, the Super Bowl MVP. I think he looked pretty good in week 1, so he was looking like the old Cooper Kupp, so I think he could end up climbing back into that top 1 or 2 receivers in the league category that he was a couple years ago if he stays healthy. So that might be a guy to watch under the radar, a guy that a lot of people wrote off, but guess what? He didn't write back. Shout out Geno Smith. In terms of a completely random guy that I think might have a good season, I said this before, maybe look at a guy like Will McDonald on the Jets. He could be a very good pass rusher down the line, somebody to look out for, but this is just me kind of taking a shot in the dark. Will Tom Brady announce his unretirement on national TV? Well, he fucking better not, because I don't want to see that motherfucker on a football field ever again. But you know, the sad thing is though, and I say this, but the quarterback play right now in the NFL is so bad that he would probably still, fresh out of retirement at 47 years old, he would still probably be one of the top 15 or so quarterbacks just by default right now. And it truly does pain me to say that shit, but it is probably true. Should Tua continue playing, or should this be it for him? Should he continue playing? No, absolutely not. His brain is fucking scrambled eggs at this point, dude. He's had like 4 concussions, probably more, but really nobody should be playing football. That's the whole thing. Nobody should be playing at the NFL level. You got these huge, fast, super strong human beings crashing into each other. Every play is a fucking car crash. These dudes are doing damage, massive damage to each other. So nobody in general, really, if you're looking at it from that perspective, should be playing football. And Tua is no exception to that, especially since he is prone to concussions. But I think he probably, I don't think this will be it for him. I think that he loves the game too much, and I think that he's probably going to say, you know what, I can still give it another try, because he has put up great numbers the last couple years. So I don't think he mentally will be ready to let go. I don't know if the decision will be taken out of his hands, but something tells me he's not going to be done. But should he stop playing? Yes. Football should, in general, as a sport, really shouldn't even exist, because it just completely destroys people's brains. But I do think we will see Tua on a football field again. But yeah, obviously it's getting now to the point where it's pretty spooky for him, and you really do start worrying for him for his future, because he's still a young guy, and you know, football, there's life after football, so you don't want to continue to see him get hurt. Joe Alt, underdog pick for Rookie of the Year. Joe Alt is probably going to be a all-pro, but guess what? There is no fucking way in hell that the voters and the media are ever going to pick an offensive lineman for any major individual award. So no matter how great Joe Alt might be, in his first career game, he really did a great job on Max Crosby, one of the best players in the league. Looks like he's going to be an absolute stud for years to come. He's absolutely not going to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. That's always going to be going to a skill position player. If Kirk Cousins plays absolutely horrible against the best team in the league, Eagles obviously, do you think Michael Penix gets a shot next week? No. I think the bigger concern with, let me take a step back here. There's no way that Cousins is going to willingly get benched, because they're paying him a shitload of money with that contract. The only way that I think Penix is going to see the field, no offense to Brett Favre, is if Kirk Cousins gets injured. But now here's the twist. Cousins might actually be injured. He looked like complete dog shit physically in week 1 versus the Steelers. So I don't think there's any way that Penix is going to see the field this year unless Cousins gets injured, not because of play. But yeah, if Cousins ends up having like if he ends up putting up like Bryce Young numbers and shit, then yeah, Penix might get a shot. But you know, unless Cousins gets injured, which he might be because he looked physically limited in week 1, then Penix might get a shot. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But either way, it's the Falcons. No matter what, they're going to end up being 7-10 or 6-11 or some shit like that. They had their chance to be relevant in 2016, and we all know how that ended. Last question. Should the Panthers replace 15 of their backups and third stringers with terminally ill cancer patients so that when they die, it will force a disaster draft and they would be able to steal an improved roster from the other teams in the league? Folks, I have to admit, I am actually ashamed of myself for thinking for about 2 or 3 seconds if this is actually feasible. That's just kind of how messed up my brain is. I thought, wow, is this actually possible? Could that actually work? I think the other thing is that I think if it could work and if it was legal, I don't know if the Panthers wouldn't do it because, I mean, obviously, morally and just ethically, it's completely out of bounds and uncalled for. But there's a morbid curiosity that I have to see if Carolina actually tried to do this, could they get away with it? And would they do it? Because we all know in the NFL, it's just ruthless. What have you done for me lately type of league? And the Panthers look like they're not going to be winning anything anytime soon unless they hit a home run in the draft quarterback position. But I'm actually kind of surprised that I haven't seen this mentioned before. It's insanely fucked up scenario. And that's basically what my channel is supposed to be. Just bringing shit that you never thought of before to the front and making you think about it. And I am actually serious. It's just even, would this be legal? I don't know. They would probably have the cancer patients would probably have to declare for the draft or something. I don't know how this would work, but I gotta admit, I am kind of intrigued. Full disclosure, this is an anti-cancer channel. Fuck cancer. If you do have cancer or if you're in remission, just know that I support you, that you can kick that disease's ass.